Welcome. In this video, we're going to break down the 2025 and 2026 governor elections in the U.S. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the 2025 elections first, then 2026, filling it out this map, going to our own blank copy of the map, and just analyzing every single race from there, and assigning ratings. Note that the tilt category I'm saving until the end because I'm going to do safe, likely, and lean based on analysis, and then we're going to get to the toss-ups, and then I'm going to use tilt just sort of based off my gut instinct as to what's going to happen in some of these states that are toss-ups. I will be factoring in the fact there's going to be a moderately big blue wave, I think. I think that we're going to see Democrats make gains in backlash to a lot of Trump's administrations and his policies. Now, in 2025, we have two governor races up. We have Virginia and New Jersey. Both of them are term limited. New Jersey is held by a Democrat. Virginia is held by a Republican. Looking at the election data, we can see that both Virginia and New Jersey voted for Harris, but both were close. Both were within 6 points. Now, for Virginia, this wasn't really surprising. It kind of hovered there for a bit. Obviously, Biden won it by 10 points, but it voted for Clinton by 5. It voted for Obama by 4, and before that, it voted for Obama by 6. So it's kind of hovering there. Whereas New Jersey was consistently voting for Democrats in like the 14 to 17% range until it went all the way down to 6% for Kamala Harris. However, that was also in a Republican-friendly year. Which 2021 was as well, and we saw that Republicans picked up the Virginia governorship by around 2 points, and they held Murphy to a 3-point win in traditionally strongly Democratic New Jersey. There is reason to believe, though, why Virginia could flip. When you look at the 2021 Virginia House, Glenn Youngkin had co-chaos. And in the House of Delegates, we saw Republicans pick up 7 seats and acquire a 52 to 48 majority. In 2023, however, Republicans lost that majority and went into a 51-49 minority in the Virginia House of Delegates. So Republicans actually picked up the House of Delegates and had 2 of the 3 chambers in Virginia, and now they lost it. And it's still very close, but I think that Virginia is one of those states that's traditionally a swing state, and maybe Trump made it a lot less Democratic, a lot less Republican, because of the anti-Trump backlash. I think that Trump could maybe tap into some of that and try to get voters back in Virginia, but I don't know how he's going to do that. And based on that, Virginia I'm going to put in a toss-up category for now, just because we don't know enough. And again, the pollsters are pretty split too. New Jersey, they're all saying it's going to lean Democratic. New Jersey, Phil Murphy is term limited and can't run. Now, I've already mentioned, we'll get to candidates in Virginia in a second. We do have several strong candidates for the New Jersey governor election, whereas on the Republican side, we see that they have candidates, but they're less strong. Now, Jack Ciattarelli was the nominee for governor in 2021, who came very close to unseating Murphy. He'll be getting another crack at it, so we'll see how that goes. And he's probably the strongest Republican that they have. But as of now, I would put New Jersey in the lean Democratic category, especially when you factor in that this year is likely going to favor Democrats, and how 2024 may have just been an anomaly with it being so close in New Jersey. Meanwhile, in the state of Virginia, we obviously Glenn Youngkin can't run. Looks like the nominee is Winsome Earl Spears, because I think the primary already happened, and it's against Abigail Spanberger. So this is the state that we have the most concrete data for, and Spanberger leads in most of the polls, but not by a lot. And there's so many undecided voters in Virginia that it makes it tough to tell what's going to happen. For now, I'm putting Virginia as a toss-up, and we'll analyze Virginia after. And now we have 2026. And I'm just going to fill in the states that I think are going to be safe in 2026 first. I think California is going to be safe for Democrats. I think Hawaii is going to be safe for Democrats. I think that we're going to see Connecticut be safe for Democrats. Massachusetts will be safe for Democrats. And that's sort of about it as of right now that I put in a safe Democratic category. Republicans have Idaho, they have Wyoming, they have Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, Nebraska, South Dakota, Oklahoma, and as of now, I'm putting Vermont in here. And you might be saying, well, that's insane. How is Vermont there? The state voted for Harris by 32 points and was her strongest state. And in 2020, it voted for Biden by 35 points, and it was his strongest state. Well, I leaked it earlier, but look at the governor map. Scott won by 51 points. In 2022, Scott won by 47 points, etc. You get the point. Phil Scott is a very, very popular incumbent governor of the state of Vermont. Looking at most popular governors in America, looking at the U.S. governor approval rating tracker, Scott remains the most popular governor. He has a 75% approval rating. So, you look at this, and obviously we can't really look at it. But looking at Phil Scott, he's one of the most popular governors in America. If Phil Scott runs for governor of Vermont, he is going to be winning re-election. Now, if he doesn't, that changes everything, and Vermont's governorship likely flips blue in that case. But if he's going to run, I'm putting Vermont as a safe red state for now, which I know it's crazy, but yeah, that's what we're doing. Now, you might notice there are several solid states for the presidential election that I didn't color in yet, although I did forget to put Illinois as a safe blue state. That's on me. But the reason why is because candidate quality in these kinds of races matters a lot. Looking at the Rhode Island governor election, this is one where Dan McKee is going to run for re-election, and he's declared, but he's vulnerable to a primary challenge because he has low approval ratings. The problem is, though, is that Republicans don't really have anyone to nominate, but the independents do have Helena Folkles to nominate. Looking at Dan McKee approval ratings for the state of Rhode Island, he's among one of the least popular governors in the nation with a 43% approval rating and a 41% disapproval rating. So with such low approval ratings, it's tough to put it in a safe column. But the absence of anyone to really nominate against them makes you want to put it safe. I'm going to put it in the likely Democratic column, though, because I do think that it is possible that even if I don't think a Republican can win the seat, an independent could maybe be able to win the seat of Rhode Island. So that's the first likely Democratic state. And other likely Democratic states, I think that we're going to see New Mexico and Colorado there. Now, New Mexico and Colorado, these are states that have not voted for Republicans since the mid-2000s. And you can see that they've consistently voted by large margins for Democrats starting in 2008. However, there's a bit of a difference when you look at their trajectories. As you can tell, looking at these maps, it started off with Colorado being a lot more red than New Mexico. And it's been that way for decades. Colorado's always more red than New Mexico. And in 2012, we still saw this trend hold. And even in 2016, 2020, though, it flips. Biden wins New Mexico by a comfortable 11%, but he wins Colorado by an even more comfortable 13.5%. And in 2024, Harris only wins New Mexico by 6%, and she wins Colorado by 11%. So when you look at it that way, you can see that the amount of support that Democrats have in Colorado has really skyrocketed recently. And looking at some of the governor races, you can look at the shift, how Colorado is safe for Democrats. New Mexico is a lot more dicey, seeing as Polis won by 19 points and Grisham won by 6.4. Looking at the 2018 results, Polis wins by 10 and Lujan Grisham won by 14, but that was also back when Colorado was less Democratic than New Mexico was. We can look at other things too. Looking at Senate, Bennett won re-election by 14 points and Heinrich only 10. When they both had elections up in the same year, Hickenlooper unseated an incumbent Republican who won election in 2014. Hickenlooper unseated a incumbent by 9.3 points. Lujas only won by 6.1%. Now, it wasn't an open race because Udall had retired, so it was an open race, but still, it was closer than unseating an incumbent when traditionally there's an incumbency advantage. But without that incumbency advantage from Polis, I could see Colorado becoming a bit dicier. The pollsters have, the pollsters have Colorado as safe, and New Mexico they have as being closer. Looking at some of the candidates in Colorado for the governor election, we see that we have Michael Bennet, who is the current senator, and he's going to be running for governor of the state of Colorado. Phil Wisely, who's currently the Colorado Attorney General, will also be running, and there's some other people who we could see as well. Whereas the Republicans, they have some candidates, but they don't really have nearly as much name recognition. I think Greg Lopez, who's currently in the 4th District of Colorado, a former representative in the 4th District of Colorado, and who is a former governor, might be the strongest candidate. He won the 4th District special election, and in November, he didn't run for re-election. I still think that Greg Lopez could be the strongest candidate, because he probably has the most name recognition. But again, I don't think it's going to be enough to unseat them at all. I just am like, is it going to be enough that it's like, if the tide completely turns against Democrats, so I think they're going to hold Colorado, that I'm less sure of. Looking at the state of New Mexico, this is forecast to be more of a battleground, and we have some candidates. I think Deb Haaland, who is a former Secretary of the Interior, is a stronger candidate. Republicans, their only declared candidate is the mayor of Rio Rancho, which is not a very big city. I mean, it's a decently sized city, but it's not that big. And while they have other people who have expressed interest in running for this race, I'm not sure if any of them are going to get it. I'm putting it in a likely column because I don't see any strong enough candidates to really undo the natural advantage that Democrats have in a state like New Mexico. Now, Maine is interesting. Very interesting. Maine is like this political weird state. Because in Maine, Susan Collins won re-election by 8.6% on the same ballot that Biden won election by 9%. And we've seen Maine really have its ebbs and flows in its political form. but we saw Harris win by 7%. So it's a pretty Democratic-leaning state, despite the Republican senator. But Janet Mills is term limited. She can't run. As of now, the Maine Secretary of State, Sheena Bellows, is the only declared candidate, but Jared Golden has expressed interest, although right now it seems like he's going to run for re-election in District 2 of Maine. I think that District 2 of Maine, if Golden runs, he's going to win that district. But I think if he doesn't run, based on the partisan lean of the 2nd District, it's going to flip. But that's a story for another time. On the Republican side, we have the former Assistant Secretary of State, Robert Charles, and he's probably the strongest candidate. If Jonathan Bush runs, he's a cousin of George W. Bush. He'll have name recognition. Bruce Pelican could also be running, and he could be a strong candidate. But right now, they're saying it's going to probably be likely for the Democrats. And I think that a lot of it depends on, does Jared Golden run? And I'll tell you why. Trump won the 2nd District of Maine by 9% this year. And in 2020, he won the 2nd District by 7.4%, which is a lot. Despite that, though, Jared Golden, who was first elected in 2018, he was first elected by unseating Pelican by 1 percentage point. You could see how he had addition in 2016. He has held on to it ever since. 2020, he wins by 6.1 points. 2022, he wins by 6.1 points. 2024, he still wins by 0.55 points. So he still wins re-election on the same ballot that Trump carried the district and got that electoral votes by 9 points. Golden can win against Republican voters, and if he runs, I don't think anyone can take him down, and I think it's gonna be pretty safe for Democrats. But if he doesn't run, Republicans have some strong candidates too, and Maine is not totally out of reach for the Republicans. Looking at the 2018 elections, we saw the Democrats flipped the governorship of Maine, but it wasn't just that they flipped. In the legislative elections, we saw Maine's Senate also flip blue. But again, that was 2018 in a strong blue wave. And Republicans have been chopping down on the margins of both the Senate and the House recently. And even though Democrats maintain a majority in both, it's close. It's close. Looking at the 2024 results in the Maine House of Representatives as an example, looking at the 2024 results in the Maine House, we see that Democrats' majority is only 2 seats. It's 76-73. If Republicans flip 2 seats, they'll gain control of the Maine House of Representatives and lost 5 seats to the Republicans. In the Maine Senate, we saw the majority go down to 20-15 as Republicans flipped 2 districts. Again, the majority in the Maine Senate it is only 3 seats. So neither of these chambers are out of reach. Maine is not a state that's out of reach for Republicans. I'm putting it as likely Democrat for now. I think it could go down to lean if Democrats put up a weak candidate and Republicans put up a strong candidate, and it could even be vulnerable to flipping at that point. But if Jared Golden runs, it's going to solidify the race in Maine, and that's where I'm putting Maine. Now, as for some of the Republican states, we have a trio of New Hampshire, Texas, and Iowa that some would say are safe, and some would say are likely, and some would say even get more competitive than that. Looking at the professional pollsters, they have Texas as solid. They have Iowa, disagreement there, and they have New Hampshire sort of in the likely to solid range. So let's dissect all 3 of them. Well, we'll look at New Hampshire first. New Hampshire is a state where the fundamentals are the most against the Republicans. Harris won by 3 points, and the last time that New Hampshire voted for a Republican for president was in the 2000 election. Obviously, everyone knows how decisive Florida was, but if Al Gore could win New Hampshire, he would have won the election. Nonetheless, he lost New Hampshire, but that was the last time. looking at the Senate races in New Hampshire, the last time that a Republican won a Senate race in New Hampshire was 2010 with Kelly Ayotte. And looking at the House elections, New Hampshire has had 2 Democrats for a very long time. It's been that way since 2016. In 2014, Republicans won the 1st district, but then they were unseated in 2016, and since then, it's been consistently 2 Democrats represented in New Hampshire in the House. However, for governor, Sununu flipped the governorship in 2016 as he won by 2.3 points. However, his margins of victory in re-election since have grown. In 2020, he wins re-election by 32 points, and in 22, it gets a lot more competitive, but he still wins by 16 points. In 2024, Sununu decides not to run for governor, and Kelly Ayotte, who is a former senator, runs for governor and wins by 9 points. So this is a state where it's not like when Maryland had Larry Hogan as governor. It's not like when Massachusetts had Shirley Baker as governor, where the moment that they decide not to run, they immediately flip back to the Democrats. This is not like that. This is not just. It's not just one person. Sununu left office, Kelly Ayotte was still able to hold down the governorship and win it. So she's got support from Democrats. And you really just cannot deny with that. And while Ayotte has not stated she's going to run for governor yet, I'd be pretty shocked if she doesn't, based on everything we know. What makes New Hampshire, even crazier is look at the New Hampshire Senate, where Republicans have a 16-8 majority, so a supermajority against the Democrats. They don't have a supermajority in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. However, they still have a 222 to 178 majority against Democrats in the New Hampshire House. So Republicans have a trifecta in New Hampshire, despite on a federal level it leaning blue consistently. So as a result, I'm putting New Hampshire in the likely Republican column. I think that Ayotte is beatable, especially since Maggie Hassan was able to do it. Maggie Hassan was able to do it in 2016. That being said, I think it's going to be tough to unseat her in New Hampshire. Now, Iowa is a state that consistently, strongly has swung towards Trump at 13.2%. But you also have the thing of... You also have Kim Reynolds, who has a 49% disapproval rating. But she's not running for re-election in Iowa. I think that her poor administration is going to hurt Republicans, but Kim Reynolds is not running for re-election, so I think that that's a big blessing for them. Democrats, their strongest candidate is going to be Rob Sand, who's the Iowa Auditor of State. There's tons of strong candidates on the Republican side who could run for governor of Iowa. And this is a state that, has probably had one of the biggest rightward shifts over the last decade. Looking at the shift from 2012 to 2024, very few states have swung by more than 15 points, and Iowa might very well be the biggest. I can't tell, but Iowa very well might be the biggest, as it has swung by 19 points to the Republican Party, which is it's remarkable how much we've seen Iowa swing towards the Republican Party. And, as a result of that, I do sort of tend to think that Iowa's going to be a bit out of reach for Democrats, but it's not like it's a done deal where it's totally out of reach for Democrats. Chuck Grassley only won re-election by 12 points in 2022, and in 2020, Ernst only won re-election by 6.5%. So we've seen Iowa absolutely get close. In the obviously now all 4 seats in Iowa are controlled by Republicans, but it was only in 2018 where Democrats had 3 of the 4 seats in Iowa and were 3.3 points away from flipping the 4th district and having all 4 seats in Iowa. So for those reasons, I'm putting it in the likely Republican column. Texas, I'm in between likely and safe for Texas, sort of because, as you could see, Texas gave Republicans a tease when Trump won by only 5.6 in 2020 and only 9 in 2016, just to slam the door on Democrats as they won by 14%. Also, looking at Senate races in Texas, 2018, again, Democrats had a tease as Cruz won re-election by only 2.5 percentage points, just for Cruz to win by 8.5 percentage points in 2024. So, we've seen Texas, and maybe it's because of voter suppression that's going on in the state where they try to make it tougher for Democrats to vote. Maybe that's why Texas is turning more Republican. But it looks like Greg Abbott is going to be running for re-election for a fourth term. And, looking at these candidates, we don't really see any strong Democrats here. Looking at the governor elections for 2022, Greg Abbott won re-election by 10.9 points, and it was against Beto O'Rourke. The same Beto O'Rourke that in the 2018 Senate race lost to Cruz by only 2.6%. So Beto O'Rourke was about the strongest Democrat that you could have in Texas, and he still lost by a lot. I'm actually going to put Texas in a safe Republican column, because I don't really think there's anyone in Texas who could unseat Greg Abbott now that he's going to be running for re-election. Now we sort of get into some of the closer states in a little bit, but we still have a few states to dissect. Florida is a state that has also had a tremendous rightward shift. In 2012, Obama won the state. He won the state by 0.88. In 2016, it was a core swing state, voting with Trump by only 1.2. In 2020, Trump only won by 3.4. And yet now Trump wins by 13.1%. Looking at the midterm elections in Florida, Marco Rubio won a seat by 16 points in the state of Florida. And looking at the governor election, we've seen Ron DeSantis win by almost 20 points. However, DeSantis has a high disapproval rating of 41%. And that's the thing you have to understand too. And DeSantis can't run for re-election either. Now we have Casey DeSantis, his wife, who could run, and is also for the Republican primary. Matt Gaetz is a possibility, and there's several other Republicans who could run. Looking at the Democrats, they have some candidates who've expressed interest, but none of them seem particularly strong. All the pollsters are saying it's going to be solid, but I'm going to put it as likely. Just because I think that Florida has done, has shown to an extent that even though it's swung to the right, it's not like an automatic lock, and this is going to be an open seat where we could see Democrats put some attention onto it. And again, there's a lot of states that I haven't gotten to yet, but can be much closer than you'd anticipate. Even though I completely forgot to put mail in a solid blue. Oh my goodness. Because candidate quality matters a lot here. A popular governor or an unpopular governor can really swing the vote. And looking at unpopular governors, we have Tina Kotek. She has disapproval ratings of 41%, so she's one of the most unpopular governors. Now, I'd show you more than console, but I have access to it, but 41% for a governor, that's a lot. And they're saying solid Democrat, mainly because we don't really see any Republicans going against her. But in 2022, you have to recognize that the Oregon governor race was close. It was around 3% because of poor approval ratings in the previous administration. Remember, Kate Brown had the lowest approval rating of any governor, and Oregon was seen as a possible Republican pickup. Now, obviously, Oregon was not picked up by Republicans, but still. it's tough for me now because right now I put Oregon in a likely Democratic column, but I could absolutely downgrade it to lean if a strong candidate from Oregon emerges themselves. Now, finally, Ohio, before I get to the really close states. Mike DeWine is term limited and can't run for re-election. Ohio is a state that we've seen swing hard to the right, but it's not the it's not it's not out of reach for Democrats. It's not totally out of reach for Democrats. Republicans don't have a super strong candidate up yet. Jim Tressel might run, and if he does, that's gonna really tighten up Ohio by a lot. And Democrats only have Amy Acton, who's the former director of the Ohio Department of Health, but they have both Sherrod Brown and Tim Ryan. Sherrod Brown lost re-election by 3.6%, but that was a much better showing than Harris, who lost by 11.2% in the state of Ohio. Looking at, Senate. Looking at the Senate races, Brown was able to win. Even as Trump was winning, he was still able to win in 2018 by a lot. And Tim Ryan, in a state that has leaned significantly towards Trump, Vance was held to only a 6.1% margin of victory. So those are two strong Democratic candidates who could run for governor. They both expressed interest in doing so. It's unclear who would win a primary, Acton or Brown, but probably Sherrod Brown. And in that case, Brown can really win over, even Acton is beating Romanski in the polls. But, looking at some of the hypothetical polling, they lose to Tim Ryan. I can see this Ohio race really shaping up to be a big battleground. I'm putting it as a lean Republican governorship. I'm going a bit aggressive on Ohio. It's going in a lean Republican thing. Now, as for Alaska, you have Mike Duvlani. He's term limited, can't run. And for the Republicans, there's Nancy Dahlstrom, who's the lieutenant governor and who was candidate for the Alaska House but didn't get it. And then you have Mary Peltola from the Democrats and Tom McGeek. Tom McGeek is the former minority leader of the Alaska Senate, and he's the uncle of Representative Nick McGeek. And Mary Peltola was a U.S. representative who was able to win in this normally, deep red state that voted for Trump by 13 points in 2024. In 2022 and in 2024, she only lost by a little bit. Looking at the House elections, Alaska, it was close when Peltola won for re-election, and she won the seat in 2022. So, now we don't know if she's going to run for Senate, for House, or for governor, but if she runs for governor, she can absolutely win over Democratic voters. But the pollsters are putting it as safe, although they didn't update the polls in a while. And we don't know what Mary Peltola is going to do. Because I don't think Tom McGeek is a strong enough candidate to actually win a race in Alaska. But Mary Peltola is. And it's likely going to be a bit of a Republican pushback. I'm putting Alaska as a lean Republican state for right now. The final lean Republican state that I'm putting in is Kansas, which I could very well see solidifying towards the Democrats. But Kansas is a state that Trump won by 16.1%, and is one of the most, and it's, a bit of a surprise how Democrats even got the governorship in the first place. They got it because in 2018 there was a blue wave and the Republican administration was unpopular, so she won by 5%, and she had enough popularity to still hold a seat in 2022. That being said, looking at she's term limited and can't run for re-election, but if she has enough popularity from a previous administration, that could help. The Democrats here. Nonetheless, I see the state leaning Republican, and it's probably their best opportunity for a Republican pickup in the cycle. That's where Kansas goes. And no, I have not forgotten about New York. And yes, I know that Harris won the state by 12.6%, but Hochul, who is not mentioned here. Looking at Kathy Hochul, she is not a popular governor in New York, and I would know that. Looking at this Marist poll, Hochul's approval rating is 39% in New York and 46% disapproval. Now, I'm not saying the Marist poll is the most reliable poll in the world, but it does show that that Hochul's vulnerable. In 2022, Kathy Hochul won the election by 6.4% against Lee Zeldin. Lee Zeldin was someone who refused to admit that Biden had won the 2020 election, and he was one of the ones who had called it stolen. And in a state as blue as New York, a state that Biden won by 23 points, and now it took a huge shift towards the left. I absolutely see Kathy Hochul as being vulnerable. I absolutely see New York as being a battleground state. Looking at the Republicans, they have Bruce Blakeman, who's a Nassau County executive in a county that's a bit of a swing county, and Mike Luer, probably the strongest one from New York's 17th Congressional District. He's the current representative. Looking at these results, he wins re-election. But he won re-election by considerable amount, and you have to really understand too, it's political lean. This is a district that even Kamala Harris was able to win, and generally votes Democratic in big elections. Obviously, Zeldin was the exception, but still. So if Mike Luer runs, I could absolutely see this being close. Kathy Hochul is running for re-election. She might get primaried by Bowman and Torres, or even Antonio Delgado. So she is very vulnerable to a primary challenge, though most polls still show her as winning in the primary. But looking at the general election, the polling is not as comfortable. Many say that against Luer, Hochul would still win, but against a different candidate, Hochul might lose, and it's tough to say what's going to happen. I am putting New York as a lean Democratic state just because, unfortunately, I do think that number one, it has enough of a Democratic lean where I think Hochul could still probably win re-election. And number two, and probably more importantly, if Hochul loses in a primary, it's going to solidify the race in New York by a lot. A lot. Next up in this sort of category, we have the state of Minnesota. Now, Tim Walz has expressed interest and will likely run, and that should pretty much clear the path for everyone else. We don't have any strong Republicans who've declared yet, but we do have some that have expressed interest. David Hann was a former minority leader of the Minnesota Senate. We have Scott Jensen, who ran for the seat in 2022 to Walz and only lost by around 8 points. We have Lisa DeMuth, who's a Speaker of the Minnesota House, and she's a Republican, yes, is also a potential candidate for governor. And it's tough to really say what's going to happen in Minnesota. I have it leaning Democrat because when Walz ran for vice president under the Harris ticket, he only won Minnesota by around 4 points. And Minnesota is a swing state that tends to lean Democratic. And even with the national environment favoring Democrats, I still see Minnesota being a bit close. I still see it being close. Many would say likely. I'm putting it as lean. Now this kind of takes us to some of our, core battlegrounds. We already talked about Virginia. We have Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. All states that Trump won, but narrowly. Pennsylvania by 1.7, Michigan by 1.4, Wisconsin by 0.86, Nevada by 3.1, Arizona's 5.5. So they're all less than 6. This really takes us down to these core swing states. And what do I think is going to happen there? Now, Pennsylvania, Republicans have had a hard time nominating any good candidates. I'm sorry, but they just haven't nominated any good candidates in a while. In 2014, you have Corbett, a very unpopular incumbent, and he loses re-election by 10 points. 2018, you put up Wagner. I don't even know who a Wagner is. And Wolf wins by 17 points. 2022, Shapiro wins by 15 points against Doug Mastriano, who has expressed interest in running for the seat. And there are some problems with Doug Mastriano. Ouch. Doug Mastriano is a very weak Republican candidate, and this election is going to sort of test if they don't put Mastriano up. Is Shapiro really that popular, or were they voting against Mastriano? That's what it's going to tell. But Republicans, I mean, the state treasurer is a much stronger candidate. Stacey Grady is a much stronger candidate that you could put up, and Josh Shapiro is going to run for re-election, but we don't know how this is going to go. Now, in the Republican primary, right now, Garrity is leading slightly, but it's still too early to tell who's going to run. Nonetheless, I think Shapiro is popular enough that Pennsylvania, I think, is going to lean Democratic. I don't really see Pennsylvania as being a toss-up. I think even if they put up a strong candidate, Shapiro is a pretty strong governor himself, and I think that he is going to win re-election. We have 5 more states to hit. Now in Georgia, the Republican incumbent Brian Kemp is term limited. Chris Carr, the Attorney General, looks likely to run for it. If Marjorie Taylor Greene runs, this race is going to be pretty significant for Democrats. Buddy Carter and Brett Raffensperger are also potential candidates. But as of right now, it does look like Burt Jones is the front runner, who's a lieutenant governor. Democrats, they could go Stacey Abrams, they could go Keisha Bottoms. Looks like Abrams has the most support, and it's really going to be a toss-up. And I sort of agree with that because it's a weird state. Georgia Republicans have a trifecta right now, and in the governor race in 2022, Kemp was popular, and he won by almost 8 points. But in the concurrent Senate elections, we saw Warnock hold a seat by 3 points, and Georgia Democrats swept both of the elections for Georgia U.S. Senate seat in 2020, so I have Georgia being a toss-up for now. Nevada, you have Joe Lombardo, the incumbent governor, Aaron Ford, the Attorney General, and is going to run. The former governor Steve Slowick has also floated it. I have Nevada being a lean Republican state because you do have a popular incumbent, and Republicans have shown signs of being able to win in Nevada. Arizona. Katie Hobbs has expressed interest. She's currently the incumbent governor. Annie Biggs, Karen Robertson have both declared for governor, and tough to say because against Biggs, Hobbs likely wins, and against Robinson, she likely wins too. I know that she ran in 2022 against the weak Republican and only won by less than 1%, but given how their weak candidates up, I'm putting Arizona in the lean Democratic column. And I did not mean to do it to California. My bad. Michigan, term-limited Democrat in a state that generally has tend to been purple to slightly blue. We don't know. We know Mike Dugan is going to run as an independent, so that's going to siphon the votes away, potentially. Can't go through all the candidates, but looking at the polling, Democrats consistently have a slight edge, and given a lean, I'm putting Michigan in the lean Democratic column. Wisconsin also can get dicey. Because Tony Evers has expressed interest, and he's likely going to run for governor. But the realizing it's a battleground, Republicans don't have too strong of a candidate they can put up, though. And it's, lean in their favor. I have Wisconsin as a lean Democratic state. This leaves the 2 toss-ups. Going with my gut, I think Democrats take back Virginia. I think Democrats take back Virginia very slightly because Youngkin has not shown to be the most popular governor in there, and the state naturally leans Democratic. And I'm also putting Georgia as a tilt Democrat state. I think going with my gut, going with the national lean, and going with Ossoff to potentially provide coattails if he can win re-election, I think that the Georgia governorship gets flipped blue. This would result in a net loss of 1 seat for the Republicans if this verifies, which would mean that they would exit the cycle having a 26-24 advantage in governorships.